Your father says, I have a plan to rob a bank. Shouldn't your first reaction be, are you crazy?
I asked my dad, are you the devil here to tempt me? He said, yeah, probably.
I remember thinking, is this normal? Does everybody do this?
The three of them, a family affair.
He had recruited his own children to be his accomplices.
And
I mean, duh. How long does three people think that they can just rob banks for? You know, it doesn't last forever.
You got your kids involved in this, and you're asking them to do time for you.
Who would want their own child ever arrested, much less doing hard time behind bars?
They'll be fine.
this guy possesses an addict's brain and a sociopath's soul.
You may think that Scott Catt manipulated and used his own children to rob banks, but it doesn't end there.
On October 1st, 2012, in Katy, Texas, a suburb of Houston, it was a pleasant afternoon, 1:50 p.m.
It's a little bit quiet on this particular Monday. Not a lot going on at all.
You know that lazy feeling you get after you have lunch and everything gets kind of quiet and subdued? That was exactly the atmosphere in First Community Credit Union.
There were 7 people inside the bank.
All employees?
Yes, sir.
And a silver Ford Focus drove down a street called Cinco Ranch Boulevard toward First Community Credit Union, and the car stopped near the bank, and out come 2 men.
What we're seeing here is the 2 suspects have arrived on the scene.
And they have on orange vests like construction workers or street crossing guards often wear.
The first thing that stood out to me were the bright orange construction vests they had on. And I thought to myself for a split second, what are they here to fix?
One man has a painter's mask on his face. Another man is wearing a fake mustache. They're wearing blue latex gloves.
One of
the men rushes toward a teller and says, "Give me everything you've got. I've got bills to pay."
What goes through a banker's mind when a robbery happens?
Fear, just to do what they say, give them what they need, they have guns.
It was pretty brave on her part.
One of them jumped the counter, one of them rounded up everybody in the office.
You can see that
Several of the tellers were actually still on their lunch break back in the break room.
Were you having lunch? What were you doing?
I was sitting in there, I was heating up some food, I was talking on the phone. One of my other coworkers was in there, she had just come in to have her lunch.
They didn't even realize anything was happening until they see a blinking alarm going off.
And I just kind of stopped and I looked up and I told the person on the phone, I was like, I've got to go.
to open the safe.
The only thing, my stomach, I felt scared for my coworkers.
They asked somebody where the back door.
This door right here is the back door of the bank, and this is where they busted out the door. That moment it hit me. They just robbed us. It took everything I had to remember, oh my God, look out the window and look for them. So these blinds, I did like this real quick. They literally walked down the sidewalk fast as they could until they got to the curb, and then they stopped and they just kind of casually walked to the car.
Bank employees just inside here saw them heading down the alley, and one of them said she saw which was the car parked over here.
And this is the first time we get the description of a silver vehicle.
And they're gone.
What seemed like 30 minutes was, I believe they were in and out in less than 3 minutes. Because they knew exactly what they were doing, they had done this before.
When you heard that this bank had been robbed, were you at all surprised?
I was, because we'd had a previous bank robbery here about 6 months prior, and I was thinking, well, that guy's in jail, who's robbing it now?
That detective and other Texas lawmen I interviewed for this story had one question. Who were these guys brazen enough to knock off a bank in the middle of the afternoon during bank hours And investigators immediately try to find eyewitnesses, noticing that there's a chiropractor who works right next door.
He had noticed two men wearing contractor reflector vests as if they were simply taking a break.
They were sitting right there next to my back door.
Like against the wall?
Yeah, they were actually,
Yeah.
They were actually right here. And that's unusual for anybody to be sitting here in the middle of the day. So I said, you know, hey, how you guys doing? And they said, fine. And I told the little guy, I said, nice mustache. And he kind of giggled a little bit.
Could you tell that the mustache was fake?
Oh, it was fake. Yeah.
Oh, you could tell.
And then the FBI
A closer look at the older bank robber reveals that he's got a...
We believe that there is someone on the outside of the bank giving them a hand.
So they had those trash bags. How much money did they actually get put in there?
A little over $29,000. It's a pretty good haul. I've had bank robberies where they've had $3,000 or $4,000 total.
Can you imagine what these employees...
Oh my goodness. A series of really jaw-dropping discoveries about these robbers. For one thing, this isn't the only bank they've robbed.
There was a robbery with similar MO at the Comerica Bank. And all of the employees there, that there was something special. Thought was, you know, we got to find out what this story is.
It'll eventually lead from the Lone Star State all the way to the Pacific Northwest and back in time to when a man named Scott Catt met Beth Worrell.
Scott and Beth grew up 40 miles south of Portland in a picturesque town called McMinnville. Beth was a champion swimmer. Scott played on the football team.
She came home and told us that she'd met this wonderful, blonde, handsome cowboy.
Beth was, very, very loving, good mommy, terrific mother.
She kept him sane. She knew how to bring him back from some of his crazy times.
They lived in a nice house with 4 bedrooms. They had 2 beautiful children. Life was good.
And then she got sick.
She went for a regular mammogram, and she called me and said they want to do some more tests.
I remember going from crying to laughing to crying to talking about going wig shopping to it's all going to be okay. You have a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old, and I mean, I think we were really positive that it was going to be just a bump in the road, and that wasn't the case.
She didn't live long after that. It just went rampant through her.
Do you have any memories from your mother?
Just one, when she was sick. I just remember her being carried down on a stretcher, bright orange. It was the brightest orange I've ever seen in my life. That's it, just that one memory. That's all I remember.
Doesn't sound like so much fun.
No, but I still have that image of her in my head. I can still see her. You know, even if she was on a stretcher, I could still see her face, which is cool.
In the years after Beth died, Scott goes to pieces. He begins drinking, he's doing drugs, he falls into a depression.
He does let alcohol get a hold of him. He turns to cocaine. He begins to slide and lose his footing.
But somehow, despite his life falling apart, he manages to hide it all from the kids.
To his credit, Scott picks up where Beth left off. He's playing the role of mother and father and doing a very fine job of it.
My dad was right there for everything. It was always just us 3.
He cooked for them. He cooked lavish meals for them. He was the president of their swim club.
We go before school, we go after school, swim meets on the weekends. I mean, it consumed our life, but we loved it. We were part of a team. It was our swim family, and my brother was always there, and he was my favorite person in the world, and he still is.
We were very close. My sister is the only consistent thing I've had my whole life, and I'm the only consistent thing that she's had too. I can just look at her and know what's on her mind, what she's worried about.
Despite the fact that outwardly it seems like a solid Cat family foundation. The fact is, there were cracks.
His persona outside the house was Dad of the Year, Volunteer of the Year. He said all the right things. He did all the right things. He took his kids to church. And then once he was home and he was alone, I think the real Scott came out.
There wasn't really a disciplinarian. I mean, there was no one there hounding us to do homework or keep up our grades.
Did you guys start drinking in the house? You
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
How old were you when that started?
High school.
And then he told me he got his dream job in Texas.
A Texas recruiter calls him and says there's an engineering job with a Houston area oil company.
So many bad memories here, he wanted to get away from it. It would be a fresh start for everybody.
And no matter how good Scott's jobs are, it always feels like the family is just a little bit short of money. And so Scott goes to his son Hayden with this insanely outlandish idea. Hey, we're gonna rob banks together.
He says, I made a decision that this is what I want to do. I want to rob banks for a living.
When he approached me and said, would you be willing to do something to get some money more illegal than selling drugs? And I said, yes.
Your father says, I have a plan to rob a bank. Shouldn't your first reaction be, are you crazy?
Looking back on it, I can't believe that wasn't my first reaction.
Why did you go along with it so easily?
I had a real struggle and a real internal struggle. I knew it was wrong, but I was really motivated by the money.
Now, it's bad enough that Scott asks his own son, Hayden, to commit this felony with him, but then he ups the ante.
He used Hayden to convince Abby to going along with the plan to rob banks.
How did you react?
Well, the way that he presented it to me was like, we need you in order to be successful. And then it was just like, okay, you know.
Like, why did they need you?
Well, so that they didn't have to drive.
Did you have any hesitation about this?
Really, there was no question. I was going to do it. There was no questions. I had no questions. They told me they needed me, so I did it.
And the way Scott explained it to me was that he didn't see this as a chance to teach his kids about crime. It was a chance to teach his kids about self-esteem.
And this is how the Cat family decides to start robbing banks together. Hayden and Scott, they're going to be the stick-up men inside the bank. Abby is going to be the getaway driver. Simple plan. What could possibly go wrong, right?
The morning of the first bank, I asked my dad, you know, are you the devil here to tempt me? And his answer is...
In Katy, Texas, just outside Houston, Scott Cat has recruited his two kids, Abby and Hayden, to join him in the family business, robbing banks.
A father who was a structural engineer, 50 years old, his 20-year-old son, and his 18-year-old daughter, both of whom look like classic American kids, and somehow he had recruited his own children to be his accomplices. No one had ever thought of that before.
This is the only one I've heard of. Well, it's the only one I've worked.
When Scott first came to Texas, he called Hayden and said, I love Texas. There's a bank on every corner. These are big banks. They're beautiful banks. There are banks after banks after bank.
Scott will later tell a reporter that this is his way of motivating his kids.
Needed to do something where they would get a reward and feel good about themselves. And so somehow, Scott thought, if I teach them how to rob banks with me, they'll feel this sense of accomplishment they can't get in high school.
And for their first family outing, they choose the Comerica Bank.
Picture this. A Thursday morning in August 2012, a strip mall. It's got it all. It's got the donut shop. It's got the Radio Shack. It's got the wedding dress shop. And it has a bank, a Comerica Bank, wedged in with all of the other businesses.
Now, the getaway driver is Abby, and she's just recently gotten her license, barely knew how to drive stick. Now, this is something they definitely don't teach you in driver's ed. How long did it take you to drive from your house to the bank?
Oh, a minute. 2 blocks away.
You robbed the bank 2 blocks away from your own house.
Mm-hmm.
Does your dad do like a mental checklist for everybody? Like remind everybody what their jobs are going to be?
you know, like, okay, well, drop us off here, and then, you know, we're gonna walk here, and then, you know, pull around back, and you pick us up here.
The daylights out of everybody in the bank. Give us all your money.
He walked in first and said, nobody move or put your hands up, or I really don't even know. He was kind of like the muscle with the gun, and I was the money guy, making sure I got all the money.
They demand money from the tellers and from the safe.
Robbing somebody at gunpoint was not something I would think I would be capable of. But when I opened the door to that greed, it wasn't an issue anymore. And in fact, I was probably willing to do more than that.
Were people scared?
Absolutely. That's been one of the hardest things to deal with, is the look of fear on some of those people's faces. I was actually shaking so bad that the employees grabbed the bag and started throwing money in for me.
The employees at the Comerica Bank also noticed that at least one of them was wearing a walkie-talkie. These employees actually heard communication coming across on that walkie-talkie.
That was Scott's rule.
That was probably like the most nerve-wracking part of it, was just like, just come out, you know, just get out of there. Because my dad kept, well, hold on. And it's like, hold on for what? What do you mean, hold on?
Now, they're ready to hightail it out of there. But guess what? The back door is locked. They can't get out.
And this was a very tense moment. They went to run out the back door and ran right into it because it was locked.
And they have to get a teller to unlock it for them.
High drama was not as carefully planned as we thought.
Did you just drive right back home, the 2 blocks home?
Yeah, I did. It was a stick shift, and I could barely like do the stick. You know, when you take off, you got to make sure you take off without killing it. And I was like,
They walked away with $70,000, which is a huge haul in the bank robbery business. Most bank robbers are lucky to get away with $2,000 or $3,000.
I assume you'd never seen so much money in one place in your life.
No, it was quite overwhelming.
The cash in your hand totally changed my mindset, my thinking. All it did was feed the greed. All I wanted was some more now.
So you were willing to rob again?
I was, yeah.
Now you think that most people, after a major score like this, would lay low for a while, get off the radar, not make any extravagant purchases. That's not the Cat family.
They used that money to purchase vehicles with it. And then there was some partying going on.
What kind of vehicles?
So, I believe they have a motorcycle, and they have a Tahoe, and they have a Ford Focus, things like that.
I went and I got my nails done. I remember that. And I just drove around and did that was kind of my thing. And I definitely looked at my dad differently after that, though, that's for sure. I remember thinking, like, is this normal? Like, does everybody do this?
Shopping, cars, partying, really nothing to show for it.
Was there anything left over?
I don't believe so. They didn't manage their money well, because 2 months later, you need to rob another bank. How long could you last with $70,000?
The problem for them wasn't so much the pre-planning; it was the post-planning that was the problem for them.
And are you thinking to yourself, what is happening here?
It was kind of like a dream. It was kind of unreal.
And soon they realized the money was gone.
Within just 2 months, the Cat family is already running out of money, and they begin plotting their next heist. But this time,
hauled down because they were so nervous, and I'm like, this is not, we need to just not. My dad very, very much, no, we have to. We have no money, we have to.
After the Comerica bank robbery, the robbers walked off with $70,000. And in no time at all, it was all gone.
So imagine you're a father who has just pulled off a bank heist using your 2 children. You might say to yourself, wow, what did I just do there? You'd think maybe that's what Scott would have thought. Oh, but no.
He had no inclination to keep his kids out of it. He thought they were a great team.
So they start looking around, and what do they see? They lock in on the First Community Credit Union.
Why this particular bank? Well, there are a number of reasons, but one of them is the bushes right in front of the bank that block the view from the street. So after you robbed the first bank, your job was to go scope out the second bank. What was that like?
I was very nervous to do that because I felt like everybody knew what I did. Everybody could feel why I was in there, could feel my vibe, and that was super scary and nerve-wracking.
When any of us walk in a bank to cash a check, whatever, we're caught on camera.
Surveillance cameras actually capture Abby on her stealth reconnaissance mission of this bank.
Let me tell you, she is not opening an account. It's Abby Cat doing a little recon before the robbery.
We wanted to know some of the details going into it, I guess, about how we were going to enter and how we were going to exit.
And when she gets back, she, her brother, and her father sit down and essentially draw up maps to use as a guide for once they get inside the bank.
Now, the next step in the planning is to change their disguises. They swap out those white painter overalls that they used in that first robbery for something else.
Some reflective orange vests, some mustaches, glasses, hats. They were doing some construction in the area, and that was our disguise, I guess, to maybe walk around and mill about a bank without drawing too much suspicion.
So it seems a safe bet would be to purchase those contractors' reflective vests. So Abby and Hayden go to the Home Depot.
And you chose Home Depot because?
Proximity to our house.
And you didn't think that someone could trace that?
I didn't think there would be anyone following up behind us.
And like Scott did on the first robbery, he had Hayden, the night before the second robbery, go out, steal some license plates from a car in a adjoining parking lot, tape them to the license plates in the car they were going to use to hide the real license plates, but to be able to rip them off as soon as they could when the robbery was over.
Now it's the day of the robbery, October 1st, 2012, and as they prepare to leave the house, Abby says her gang is not exactly brimming with confidence.
They were trying to take shots of alcohol, and they couldn't even get the alcohol down because they were so nervous, and I'm like, this is not, we need to just not. My dad very, very much, no, we have to, we have no money, we have to.
Were you scared?
Yes,
nervous?
I was scared. I think it's just something you just like want to be over with.
Do you remember feeling nervous?
You know, I remember feeling nervous and anxious, a lot of adrenaline. Not like the movies, or at least that ours wasn't like that.
Were people scared? As well.
And of course, Abby is ready and waiting.
My dad's just like, go, go, you know.
And he was saying, don't go too fast, right?
Oh, yeah.
He did not want you to speed.
Yeah. By the time we got on the highway, he was fine. He relaxed a little bit, and we drove home.
You guys went home. You had a pile of cash in the house.
Yeah.
Sure, you could keep doing this, right? You didn't get caught.
Yeah.
In their minds, they made a clean getaway. Little did they know how many things they did wrong.
They thought they had pulled off another perfect crime until they got home and realized that one of the license plates that had been taped on had fallen off somewhere.
It was found in the alley, laying next to a dumpster right where Abby had been parked.
The license plate had Scott's fingerprints on it.
Why didn't you just screw the new plates on?
That was for being able to remove them quickly.
So smart, but not smart enough.
Sure.
Then the second mistake they made was in the planning.
They had no idea that bank employees were still having a description of the bank robbers.
He's looking at those reflective contractor jackets.
They were just purchased.
And we were able to isolate those vests at Home Depot.
The purchase of those vests were made with Scott's debit MasterCard, and it wasn't a stretch to get him identified after that.
Then they looked at the Home Depot security video of the purchase made, and they saw that it wasn't a Scott Cat. It was a young man and a young woman.
But they don't know who those two people are on the surveillance tape. Now we use the modern day tools that cops like to use, and one of them is social media. Cops look for Scott Cat on Facebook.
And on Facebook, they saw Scott Cat's photo with his two children, Hayden and Abby, who looked exactly like the two purchasing the orange vests. Suddenly, Detective Martin had the entire Cat family sort of at bay.
Did you think that that would be the thing of everything that gave you guys up?
Not even a little bit.
They go back and look at more video and they find Scott Catt buying painter's masks. So at that point, they've got it all.
A man and his 2 children are now in custody tonight, accused of robbing.
It wasn't until they took the Cattses into custody that the police really realized how horrible a father Scott really was.
Abby called and she was yelling at me. I'm in jail and I need $10,000 to get me out of here. Get me out of here right now. And I said, you have to get that money from your father. She says, he's the reason I'm in jail.
Morning of November 9th, just after sunrise, members of the Sheriff's Department show up at the Catts' apartment to arrest Scott, Hayden, and Abby. They have no idea that Scott and Hayden were planning to do a robbery that very day, and they were just waiting for Abby to show up in the getaway car.
Shortly after that, Scott comes walking.
Which one?
We then went inside the apartment, arrested Hayden without incident.
And all of a sudden, our door gets kicked in, and you're surrounded by police officers, guns, weapons. My world came crashing down at that point.
What a wild story this is.
Horrible. How can I wrap my brain around this?
It was so unbelievable, and all I could think of was I was glad their mother was gone. So that she didn't.
We found some bank straps. A bank strap is a little paper strap that wraps around a certain quantity of money.
Apparently, they just would pull cash out of those bank straps, and when the cash was gone, they didn't throw the bank straps away.
They find no cash. 100,000.
Found crumpled sheet of paper, which was the script that Scott had written out for Hayden to say when he came into the bank robberies.
It says, this is a bank robbery. All we want is the money. 20s, 50s, 100s. No alarms, die packs, or GPS. Or you, family, and co-workers will be hurt.
But now, as they're bringing Scott and Hayden in for questioning, they want them to be able to help them answer the biggest mystery of all. Why would Scott enlist his own kids to rob banks with him?
You're going to figure out, I'm going to be forthright, okay? I'm going to be forthright.
We began talking with Scott in such a way where we were just having a conversation with him.
Was there some things that you did without the kids and then that led up and then the kids got involved?
I'll give you the whole thing, I swear. I'll give you the whole thing.
How much did he tell the officers? He spilled the beans. He waived his right to counsel, and he just told investigators exactly what happened.
I always thought that a bank was federally insured. I thought that if there is a bank robbery, we're told to just give the money and get the guy out of there. So in my mind, I thought, that's kind of, easy pickings. I guess in my mind, I thought that it was, no victims. Yeah.
It seems Scott didn't recognize the legal magnitude of bank robbery. This was all kind of casual. Aggravated robbery in the state of Texas is a big deal.
God, help me understand, how did you broach this topic with the kids?
Well, I think you have to go way back to the very beginning when their mother passed away. You gotta understand it was just the three of us. It kind of segregated us, I kind of made it so that you really couldn't get close to us.
He had manipulated them to think he was the only person that could take care of them, and they would do anything for him.
Going through that kind of very segregated kind of grieving puts them more at risk to future manipulations from that individual who now controls them psychologically, physically, financially.
Tell me how that first time went down. You sat them around the dinner table and said, let's go rob a bank, or?
I guess It wasn't around the dinner table, but it was, you know, it was a little Friday night gathering, you know, just sitting around watching movies or something. I really don't remember the details of all that. I mean, how it happened, but.
Scott's own words were that he was completely responsible for manipulating his children.
It was all my manipulation of the two of them and her. I mean, I did this whole spiel about, you know, how easy it was going to be and how we didn't have to worry about it.
These poor kids need him so badly that they choose wrong instead of right, not so much because they're evildoers, but because they loved their father. And he took advantage of that unconditional love. He doesn't know anything about unconditional love. He loves Scott Catt.
Scott was the first one that we interviewed. And then we interviewed Hayden.
Okay, Hayden, before we start.
When Hayden's initially approached by law enforcement, he said he didn't want to talk to them.
And have you talked to your father?
Yeah.
Okay. And then did your father give you any advice?
Just to cooperate.
But after having a conversation with his father, Scott, he then decided to tell them the truth. It's a great example of how much control Scott has over Hayden.
Is anybody forcing you to do this?
No.
You doing this on your own?
Yes.
Because you want to cooperate. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
How did it feel to confess?
To be honest with you, I was still full of some pride. I was still full of some arrogance.
Oh, so you felt good about it because you were bragging?
Yeah.
Not surprising he feels that way. Remember, Scott told him bank robbing would boost his self-esteem.
So he approaches you about this, and then tell me, how did it progress from there?
Well, you know, I was scared. You know, I was really scared at first.
It's so heartbreaking when you think about it. The point here is that Hayden does what Daddy says.
He definitely, as far as like what to look for in a bank, he, you know.
That Scott Catt manipulated and used his own children to rob banks, but it doesn't end there.
Scott confessed, Hayden confessed, and then Abby was brought into the interrogation room.
You know, he's always been there for me. He's been the only person that I have, so it was just like, okay, almost, you know.
If you thought a parent manipulating their children into robbing banks was bad, well, wait till you see what happens now that they've been caught.
You hear of bank robberies every day.
The Geezer Bandit. Barbie Bandits.
And they're a dime a dozen, but it is very rare that you hear of a father reeling in his own children to rob banks with him.
A man on the family that robs together stays together.
Oh, son, if I didn't know better, I'd say that was you.
The family stole thousands of dollars. Abby Catt drove the getaway vehicle.
People were fascinated with Breaking Bad.
What the hell is wrong with you? We're a family.
I think they kind of see some of the same thing with this particular story.
How did such an ordinary-looking, normal family...
them to do time for you? It says it right here. Where did you get this?
I talked myself into robbing banks. I'll just rob banks. I'm probably better at that anyway.
Investigators were very pleased, obviously, when Scott started talking about the robberies in Texas. But they were totally taken back when he started talking about robberies in another state.
Now, detectives have those bank straps they found on the floor of Scott's apartment, and some of them come from Oregon. So now detectives are suspicious that, well, maybe Scott robbed banks there too.
Okay, I'm just trying to think about the first one.
We had a big chalkboard in there, and he was writing on this chalkboard.
First Federal Savings and Loan.
Bank robbery 1 in Oregon.
Number 2 was another one. It was in McMinnville.
Bank robbery 2.
3 was in Portland.
Wow. Why would he volunteer that?
I don't know. Maybe he had a guilty heart.
I think that's all about that it's going to help him. In his mind, he's going to come clean and he's going to end up with less of a sentence.
And in that one, same thing, some sort of cover with a painter's mask, a hat, and sunglasses.
The painter's mask thing is pretty consistent.
It was with me because of my goatee.
Not only is he confessing to the crimes that they're aware of, but he's now confessing to others that they didn't even know about.
Starting off, believe it or not, in the same bank where Scott Katz's dad retired.
The newspaper printed a classic grainy photo of the robber standing in front of the teller. And Scott's mother saw it in the newspaper.
And I said, oh, son, if I didn't know better, I'd say that was you. And he grabbed the paper from me, and he looked at that. I remember so vividly, and he said, yeah, it does, kind of. And that was it. No more conversation.
And you had no idea that he was doing this in Oregon and then that he was doing this in Texas.
I swear to God.
I got lucky on that one.
If I'm surprised about anything, it's the fact that he was able to, remain undetected. You would think that someone in his hometown would have known him.
His first 5 were in Oregon.
How many of those did either Hayden or Abby know about?
None.
And now Abby's about to learn everything also. Scott Cat leaves the interrogation room, and the next person in is Abby. She's also under arrest, and the first thing she sees in that interrogation room is this whiteboard with the list of all the banks that her father robbed in Oregon.
You looking at the board?
Yeah. I saw on the whiteboard that he had wrote out some things, but I'm sure it was more than that.
It struck her, the enormity of what her father had done and what he had persuaded her to be a part of.
You know, he's always been there for me. He's been the only person that I have, so it was just like, okay, almost,
And even then, she says to the investigators, he's my dad, and I love him.
I mean, how's your dad? I didn't know him until today. I mean, he's a pretty good guy other than what he got mixed up in here.
Yes.
Good father.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, a pretty normal and happy childhood.
Normal, everyday kind of family, I guess.
Despite the horrendous things that a parent can do to a child, in so many circumstances, that child will still find a reason to believe in that parent and to make an excuse for that parent no matter what.
I've trusted him my whole life, and I continued on to do so. In the position that I was put in, it was more like, well, I have to do it to protect my family.
That if you didn't help them, then they would do it themselves and get arrested.
Exactly.
If there is a victim in a group of bad guys, she would be a victim.
He didn't approach her initially. He used Hayden to convince Abby to going along with the plan to rob banks. What exactly did they ask you to do to help?
Just drive.
Okay. Drive. When you say drive, I mean
like getaway drive.
The getaway car?
Yeah.
Did they ask you to do anything else?
No, never, and never, not once.
She's being made to believe, it's nothing, you're just driving the car, kiddo.
You just said it. I mean, we need a getaway driver to drive.
Because we're gonna rob a bank.
Yeah.
But what anyone knows who follows crime and justice is that you can just be the passenger in a getaway car and still be equally responsible to anyone who's inside that bank.
Did it seem like Abby was comfortable in her role as getaway driver?
Absolutely not. I know that it was only the influence of me and my father that pushed Abby to that.
I don't think anybody in their right mind would really understand how you get your children.
It made you feel better when I told you the guns were fake.
Dad would get hurt, or Hayden would get hurt, or they might hurt someone during this?
Honestly, no. No, I don't think they would hurt anyone, and I don't think anyone would hurt them, but that's not true.
But
It shouldn't come as a big surprise for you that you're going to have some legal consequences.
No, it's not. No, I understand that.
Now, both of these kids are facing big trouble and big prison sentences. At the same time, Scott is starting to scheme. He's trying to get them to do more time so that he can do less time. Why don't you read something for me? This is your letter to Abby, by the way. Where did you get this? Now, they're only indicted for their second robbery in Texas, that heist at the First Community Credit Union.
How many sins must I confess?
And they're facing 5 to 99 years in prison.
Texas, like most states, has an accomplice liability law. If you intended to be part
family, and now they're in this Texas jail, Hayden and Abby's lives are already completely changed.
I never thought about jail or any of the repercussions from walking to the bank. This has been life-shattering for me.
And I feel like now I've lost my mom and now I've lost my dad because most parents don't do that, so.
No, parents are supposed to keep you away from trouble.
Yeah, that's hard to deal with, to grasp onto.
It's 2013, and I sit down with Scott Catt for a series of interviews for 2020 while he's awaiting trial. Scott.
A little more to your right, just a little more.
Everybody good?
And we're rolling.
What I'm struggling with is how your kids got involved, how they are sitting in jail right now. Is that a mistake? Is that an error in judgment? Or is that just, what is that?
It's all of the above, you know. It's probably an error in judgment on all of us, and especially my part.
You're sacrificing your children for your own needs. So are we looking at some sort of a narcissistic personality, antisocial personality, borderline personality, maybe a combination of all of those things?
When I went to interview them, Scott said I would only rob banks for my family.
He wants you to believe that everything he does is in the interest of the entire family unit. That is really a bunch of baloney. This was in his blood. This guy possesses an addict's brain and a sociopath's soul.
What would your mother have said about all of this?
It probably never would have happened if my mother was here.
What would Beth say, your first wife? What would she say about you dragging your kids into, as you said, your cesspool?
I can't even imagine. Can't even imagine. I'm really ashamed.
You would expect that a father who's convinced his kids to join in a bank robbery would, after they get caught, say, look, I'll take the heat. And that's how he starts.
If you were offered a deal where you had to spend 25, 30, 40 years in prison in exchange for both of your kids going free, would you take it?
For them going free? Absolutely.
What about life in prison?
Sure.
But as time goes on, he starts talking to them about what they can do to help him.
And even though all three of them are locked up in the Fort Bend County Jail, they're all in separate cell blocks, and the only way they can communicate is by handwritten letters. At this point, Abby's lawyer gives us letters that Scott sent his kids. Now, apparently, he was trying to encourage his kids to do hard time so that he can do less of it. A month later, hey Scott, how are you? I speak to Scott again. This time, I'm allowed to be face-to-face.
Let's go. All right, rolling.
Why don't you read something for me? This is your letter to Abby, by the way.
Where did you get this?
We wrote this to Abby. As long as you, Abby, are ready to do some time, I think it will better my chances, I hope. Here you are asking her essentially to do time for you.
I was trying to manipulate. I'm trying to get something.
Who are you manipulating?
I'm trying to get everybody something that they can live with.
You told me that you would be willing to spend life in prison in order that your kids do not spend time in prison. You got your kids involved in this, and you're asking them to do time for you. It says it right here. I do believe that you doing prison time will be good for me, and I know that wasn't an easy choice for you.
And that's what she said to me in the previous letter, that she was willing to do that.
Wouldn't most parents say, I will take the entire blame here?
I would love to, but they have so much evidence on everybody that what are we supposed to do?
Again, it seems like Scott is manipulating his kids and us. He encourages Abby to talk more about his addiction and his dual life. Why does he do that? To gain sympathy. You tell your daughter. So if and when you do your interview, exaggerate about me, tell them I led a dual life involving drugs, alcohol, and women, and we can with them a little. Haha.
It was a joke. I was joking around.
Everything that he was doing and telling them was all for the sake of himself, for his own image.
He has done research on what would make them have a better story to sell. So being a drug addict, being an alcoholic, your audience would look at that and excuse it and maybe feel sorry for him.
You clearly told your kids to manipulate us, just like you were manipulating them.
I wanted to get some sort of movement on my case. I was going to do anything to get that.
I'm just so angry about what this dad did to his children. Angry as I am at Scott Capp, there was a moment I broke down in tears. And that is when, against all the rules, the sheriff allowed Hayden and Abby to see each other.
A serial bank robber who disturbingly recruited his own son and daughter to help him during a string of holdups has learned his fate.
Scott would have almost certainly been convicted at trial. He was facing up to 99 years.
He would have been convicted on all counts and got a maximum sentence. He did a very smart thing, taking a plea deal.
Well, how do you plead to the offense? Are you pleading guilty freely and voluntarily? Yes. I hereby find you guilty of the offense of aggravated robbery, which is a first-degree felony.
Ronald Scott Catt took a deal to avoid trial and the potential of life in prison. He was sentenced to 24 years behind bars.
After the sentencing, a reporter asked Scott about the impact that his actions have had on his kids, and he seems to get genuinely emotional.
They're pretty strong. And they'll be fine. It won't be easy for them, but they've worked hard. They know how to do
it. Hayden Catt took his own plea deal and was sentenced to 10 years behind bars.
Well, what do you expect prison life to be like?
Hell. As close to hell on earth as you can get.
Abby took a plea deal for 5 years behind bars.
How do you plead to the offense?
5 years for an aggravated robbery conviction is a good deal for her. It's clear that prosecutors and the judge believed she was the least culpable of the three.
It breaks my heart that ultimately I'm the one that sent my sister to prison.
Do you think that you two can be close again after this?
Oh, this will never come between me and my sister.
And she forgives you?
I haven't asked her to forgive me. I think that the possibility that she might not is too scary a thought for me to think about.
If your father were right here, Hayden, what would you say to him?
You know, I'd tell him that I forgive him and that I don't want him to carry this burden around with him for the rest of his life.
And his sister tells me she feels the same way. Is what your dad did to you, is that forgivable?
I've forgiven him.
You have forgiven him.
I have to forgive him so I can start to live a normal life. I don't want hate, anger, any of that in my heart.
Now, the three of them, father, son, and daughter, are in the same jail, but they're separated. And for Abby, who tells me that her brother is her best friend and her soulmate, being separated from Hayden is devastating.
I think we both hate to see each other in this situation. And there's just nothing we can do for each other, you know. I feel like I can't help him, and I can't comfort him, and that makes me sad.
Okay, I want to show you something. So as we're sitting there interviewing Abby, we've got a surprise for her. Okay, so, boom. Just boom it. So you may notice something's happening.
Yeah.
Sheriff Troy Nels makes this unprecedented gesture. He's allowing Abby and Hayden to meet. This just doesn't happen. So, with the help of the sheriffs, we asked if we might be able to bring Hayden in here for you to see him. If you're okay with that. I thought you might like that. So they're going right out, and he's gonna sit here. Look at that smile. How long has it been since you've seen him?
Since I've talked to him, a year.
Jailhouse rules are strict. Hayden is brought in shackled hands and feet, and the rules say no touching. But Hayden and Abby just can't seem to help themselves.
Hi, Abby. Are you doing okay?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm just happy to see you.
Yeah, me too. Abby, I'm sorry, okay?
I don't blame you for anything, Hayden. Just know that I love you forever.
I love you too.
I don't blame you for anything. Nothing.
Okay.
And I want you to know that.
Okay.
We can see the future now, at least.
Yeah.
And it's gonna be okay.
Yeah.
And we'll get to be normal brother and sister again.
Right.
I love you.
I love you too.
Can I give him a hug?
No, I can't hug you.
No?
No. It's gonna be a long time until I see you.
I know. So I'm glad.
I know I can take care of myself, so I just worry about you, Abby.
I'm fine.
Okay.
And then we get the sign from the sheriff. They can hug. If you guys want to give each other a hug, the sheriff says it's okay.
Really?
Oh.
It could be 10 years before they see each other again. And if you listen closely, that's the sound our mics pick up of their hearts beating.
When I heard that heartbeat, I said to myself, please, please, somehow let them move ahead and break the chains of that father and live to have happy lives.
Gonna be okay.
I know.
It's just gonna be a couple of years until I can see you.
When they asked me, is it okay for Abigail to hug her brother Hayden, I felt, why not? She needed that. They were kind of desperate souls there at that point in time.
I don't want you to go.
I know.
Thank you for the hug. I needed it.
I know. All right, we're gonna have to come back. All right, Abby, be strong, okay?
I love you.
Abby, I love you too. I'll see you soon.
Okay, bye.
allowing them to touch and hug that way, I felt was in many ways the beginning of some sort of a healing. There is a life thread between those two kids and even between the two kids and their father still.
You know how a lot of people see a program on television and they go, oh, that's so sad, and then they forget about it? That's not what happened.
Turns out a 2020 viewer who actually works at the jailhouse saw the program.
Tonight on 2020, the unbelievable story of a father who turned his own kids into hardcore criminals.
Saw Abby and decided to open up her heart and her house to her, taking her in after her sentence was up.
Abby, this is your new house.
Fairy tale ending, right? Not quite.
Let me tell you something about the prison system. You do not want to end up in a Texas prison. The temperatures go up over 100. When they say hard time, they mean hard time.
After their sentencing, Scott and Hayden are shipped off to a Texas state prison. And Abby was almost sent to state prison as well.
But then, in a real act of mercy, Fort Bend County Sheriff Nails did something pretty incredible. He arranged for Abby to stay in the local jail.
I just feel that she's more of a victim in this, and I'm going to do my part to try to help see her become a productive member of society.
So this was a really good break for Abby Catt, not to have to go to state prison and deal with hardened criminals.
We had her enrolled in the GED program. She was learning how to sew. We were doing everything we could to set her up for success. It takes a little bit of time, too, to learn this, doesn't it?
Yes, but I learned very fast, and we get a lot done in here.
I don't think it's every day that you see a sheriff intervene and say, listen, have some mercy here.
Can I check your work?
To go out on a limb for a double bank robber, that never happens.
So here's a second chance, another opportunity for you.
And I thank you for that.
So make me proud
Yes,
while you're
sir,
here.
I will.
All right? All right, very well.
Thank you. I've been here for just over 2.5 years. Since the last time you saw me, a lot has changed. Emotionally, I'm doing a little bit better. And I have become a better and stronger person in here.
Abby apparently had no visitors while she was in jail. But her aunt and grandmother traveled from Oregon to the jail in Texas to visit Abby, and that's the first time they have seen her in 3 years.
It was so emotional seeing Abby.
Look at you.
I had so much hope for her, and all I could do was just give her a big hug and tell her how much we loved her.
Oh, I love you.
But this visit is also a cause for celebration because Abby learns that she got parole, and that means she's going to be released in just a few months.
Do you know how lucky you are?
Yes.
Okay.
You've been given an opportunity here that many others don't ever get to start a new life.
Abby's new life on the outside is going to start with a woman she met on the inside, a volunteer sewing teacher named Susie Gregory.
See how you...
Now, Susie Gregory is a married mother of 2 grown sons.
And she watches the original 2020 piece.
I believe he feels remorse, but he's still going to have my best interest through all of this.
Becomes very emotional about it. And she was open enough to try to give Abby a second chance.
We watched the 2020 show, and I said, this is just wrong. She should not be in jail for this. And I just felt like God put me in that sewing room for Abby. I couldn't balance robbing banks, driving a getaway car, with the sweet little girl in the jail. They didn't equate. There's something wrong with that equation. I said, how would you feel if I would find someone in our church that would be willing to take you in when you got out? She said, well, could I meet them first? I said, well, I was kind of thinking about Steve and I. And she said, oh, I would love that. Thank you for everything. Oh, you're welcome.
It's pretty extraordinary that a volunteer sewing teacher at the county jail finds it in her heart to open her home to Abby. Gives you hope about the human race.
To put herself out there, to try to help Abigail, just incredible. Not anyone would just do that. It's an amazing story. Abigail Cat will be released today, and it's an exciting time for her. So this is a big day, a new beginning. Go ahead. We've been that they finished one? Well, 2 years and 10 months. I walked her out of the facility and told her, you have a second chance? I believe I even told her not to let me down. I put myself out there for her, like several other people did as well. I gave her my phone number, said, Abby, call me anytime.
I feel great. I'm ready to go.
It was the first day of the rest of her life. She had people who really cared about her. She had a plan to go to college. She really wanted to do the right thing.
So who are you calling now?
Everybody.
Everybody. Time to go home.
The idea that Susie took her in, there's a certain risk with that.
Yay, we're home. Finally.
Abby, this is your new house. And here's your room. Make yourself at home.
It's not uncommon for people like Abby to get out of jail and in a short period of time stumble.
Abby did well after being released from jail, and then I think her demons started to creep in.
Abby's future looked so bright. It didn't work out that way at all, and I put the blame squarely at her father, Scott Katz's feet.
In your wildest dreams, did you think that within a year you'd be back in doing time?
No.
It's been years since I've last seen Abby, and the last time we saw her, we thought that things were looking up. Well, it didn't turn out that way.
The last time we saw Abby, she was walking into a loving home with everything mapped out for her to start all over again.
Take me back to 2015. What was it like living with Susie?
It was amazing in some areas. In other areas, it was so different.
What was different about it?
Some of the rules. And
you just came from jail. Could any rules be any worse than in jail?
Right, but I didn't want any rules.
Our number one requirement was that she attend church on Sunday morning. We said school night, you really need to be in by 10 o'clock because you're going to have to get some homework done. On the weekends, you need to be home by midnight. Those were our rules. And she just started not coming home at all at night or coming home at 2 or 3 in the morning.
My problem was that the only people that I knew were the people I had met in the jail. I'm bored. I need someone to hang out with. And slowly that kind of takes you down the wrong path.
Where did this wrong path lead you?
You know, maybe there was a little drugs involved here and there. Just the ripping and running.
After Abby was not coming home for several days on end, we told her we would change the locks if she didn't come home. And she didn't, so we changed the locks.
I would say in the end, I just left.
It was really hard. I really considered Abby to be the daughter of my heart. We let her see a family that cared for each other, that didn't rob banks. But it just seems like the more I reflect on it, I feel like she just wasn't ready for it.
People think leaving prison, hallelujah, you're out, you're free, it's a new life, but people don't understand that's a whole different set of challenges trying to reintegrate back into society.
Abby ends up in Laredo, Texas. She gets a job driving a pilot car for wide loads.
Laredo's a border town, 150 miles south of San Antonio. Thousands upon thousands of trucks go by there every day.
And that's where you met Ricardo Gonzalez, right?
Yeah.
Little eye roll there.
Yeah.
Why?
Because I'm just going to say he's just not a good person.
When you look at Ricardo's rap sheet, which is really quite long, one after another arrest.
He's got convictions for theft, aggravated robbery,
terroristic threat of a family.
We all hung out and partied and...
Can I ask what that means? Because I'm twice your age, I don't even know what that means anymore.
Partied, you know, there's, well, obviously alcohol and maybe some cocaine and, you know, some weed, stuff like that. Whatever, I don't have another choice. You know, that's kind of how I felt. I don't have another choice. We'll see where this goes.
Where did it go?
Jail.
It's 1:30 a.m. in August 2016, and Abby goes with Ricardo Gonzalez to a Stripes gas station in Laredo.
I was high, passed out. I had parked at the Stripes while he was going to put gas in the car, and I ended up falling asleep right away.
What happens?
Next thing, I was woken up by the police knocking on my window. Pulled me out of the car and onto the ground and handcuffed me. So they say, do you realize that he's over here robbing people in the store? And I said, no, I didn't realize that. I'm sorry.
She ends up in the car with a guy who allegedly holds somebody at gunpoint.
Well, that's clearly a parole violation. Clearly. She's back in trouble again. Come on. Wow. Deja vu. All over again.
Ricardo pleads not guilty to aggravated robbery, and his trial is scheduled this fall.
Abby is never indicted for the holdup at the gas station. However, she has violated her parole.
She had not been regularly reporting to her parole officer for the previous crime.
And she gets held in this jail for over a year. When you're sitting in that jail in Laredo, did you think about Sheriff Nels? And you had promised him that you'd stay on track.
Of course.
Didn't that go through your mind?
Of course. And not just him, but everybody that was involved. And myself, too. I was disappointed in myself just as much as everybody else was disappointed in me. But it's always better to be in jail than it is to be dead.
Did you ever think growing up that that's the kind of thing that you would say to yourself in your head? It's better to be in jail than being dead?
Oh, no. I would always say I would never go to jail.
What happened was reality. It's not an easy fix. But going back to a behavior that is inappropriate is really just part of the long healing process.
The person who has set all of this in motion, Scott Catt, declined to do another interview with us. But Abby says that she has visited him in prison and still forgives him.
I think sometimes I blame myself more than him.
But he invited you to go on a bank heist.
I know he loves me. I know he loves me as his daughter. So it's hard sometimes to really get what happened.
How often do you think about your brother?
Every day. Every day. Yeah. Both of them every day. I'm definitely waiting on them to get out.
If you could send a message to Hayden, what would you say?
I love you.
Anything else?
No, just I love you. Waiting on him to come home, for sure. Waiting on Hayden to come home. I just want him to be okay when he gets out, because I know how hard it was for me. I just worry about him, because he's really got to be strong when he gets out. He has no idea. He has to be so strong. Life out here is just different from in there.
Right after our interview with Abby, we got a chance to bring her together again with Sheriff Troy Nels, who tried so hard to help her after her first arrest.
I want to have an opportunity to say a few things to her.
now turning into the small road that leads to this prison in the middle of, it's like prairie. Yeah, just taking a plea deal for a 10-year prison sentence. And I'm here to see how he's doing behind bars. Aiden.
Hey.
Hey, how are you?
Good. How you doing?
Good. You're looking good.
Thank you.
Very tan.
Been working outside. Feel good.
How's things?
Great, actually.
Really?
Yes, sir.
I mean, last time we spoke, about almost 6 years ago, you said that you expected prison to be as close to hell on earth as anything you can imagine.
Yeah.
Doesn't seem like it's been that.
Not at all. You know, I came in here very lost, very broken. In here, I found a piece that was missing. I found a faith in Christ. I feel more free and I feel more alive in here than I did out in the world. And I see now that I was basically the walking dead out there.
You know, in many ways, your father was with you but abandoned you. Still, the last time we spoke, you were pretty forgiving of him. Do you feel the same way now?
I do. You know, I think that he did the best job with me and Abby that he could. He lost his way, that's for sure.
Have you been in contact with him?
Usually every week, through our letters.
What do you talk about?
I think that he's found the same faith and redemption that I have here as well.
Do you really think he's changed?
I do.
What about Abby? Have you kept up with your sister?
You know, I don't hear from Abby as much as I would like to, but I love her so much. And I can't wait to show her what these 6 years have meant to me.
Do you think that Abby can turn her life around?
Absolutely. The best thing that we have right now is we're both young and we've learned huge life-shattering lessons at a young age. I really feel like it's put us ahead of our peers.
You feel like you're ahead of your peers?
Absolutely. So in the next 3 years, I'll be going home and I can't wait for it. I'm going to attack life with everything I got.
As for Abby's future, there's big news in her life. She's now 25 years old and she went to work in a fish processing plant. There, she met her now boyfriend, Trenzel, and they're now expecting a baby. Look at that!
Yeah,
that's amazing. Do we know the gender?
Oh boy. I'm 6.5 months pregnant currently with my first child. Everything changes once you find out you're pregnant. You can't be selfish anymore, that's for sure.
I think she's gonna be a very wonderful mother. Too easy, probably.
I don't go to the store to buy myself things anymore. I go to the store to buy him things, and that feels so awesome. That's cool.
We had a chance to reunite Abby with the sheriff who helped her years ago.
Can I give you a hug?
I just want to see a bright future for you.
I just wanted to tell you I thank you for everything that you have done for me. Obviously, I let a lot of people down, and I apologize to you if that was embarrassing to you. I learned from it all, and I came out a stronger woman, and I thank you for believing in me then and believing in me now.
Abby's aunt has invited Abby to live with her once her baby's born. You seem to have had so many chances, right? With Sheriff Nels, with Susie. What makes you think it's going to actually be different this time?
My son and my relationship. Those are two things that I can't lose. So, that's it.
You're saying the stakes are too high this time?
Yeah, I have too much. There's two people that need me. You start to put your life into perspective and like the person you are and the people you want to be around. And now we just have our son and he's gonna be with us and that's all we need.
10:15 on the evening of the 21st of November 2021, the police received a call from an address in Dragon Rise in Norton Fitzwarren, where the occupant of that address had told us that he stabbed two of his neighbours, Jennifer and Stephen Chappell. Put your hands up. When you look at the circumstances around this case, is it unusual? Of course it's unusual. Norton Fitzwarren is a respectable place. We don't expect this sort of offence to take place. We don't often get double murders. And for one person to stab two victims in quick succession is not an easy task.
Jennifer Chappell didn't even have time to get up off the sofa. When the police found her, she was slumped forward in front of the sofa where she'd kind of fallen as she was dying.
Why did it happen? There was no obvious motive for this offence. This is somebody in their own living room on a Sunday night, watching TV, sat like every other husband and wife around the country, brutally murdered within their own house.
Jennifer was my best friend in the whole world. I moved to Glastonbury and started at the local primary school, and she took me right under her wing. Jennifer commanded a room. She would walk in and instantly everyone would be like, wow. She oozed charisma. Jen embodied everything that Glastonbury stands for, crystals and witches and birds and kind of like this witchy Glastonbury essence. She used to take me onto the local music scene, which was all predominantly metal, and it was a bit of a trademark for us as friends to go for guys in bands. It was a bit of a kind of, I'm with a guy in a band. It's like, of course you are.
It's on the colourful local music scene that Jennifer meets the man who will change her life.
I knew a guy had come onto the scene that had caught her attention, and that guy was Stephen. Stephen was a teacher, but he was playing music as well in a successful band that were really well known in the area. To hear of Jennifer and Stephen, it wasn't a surprise because of who Jennifer was and who Stephen was.
From the moment 29-year-old Stephen and 26-year-old Jennifer get together, they are inseparable.
I think as soon as everybody met him, they knew he's the one. There was so much love between them. They were just the perfect match.
They were soulmates. He was very, very, very dry, very sarcastic, confident, outgoing. He loved music, absolutely loved music.
Jennifer had sent me a message saying, meet your new niece or nephew, and I will never forget the joy I felt seeing the ultrasound photo and just going, oh my God, I'm going to have a nephew or a niece. They were so over the moon, because I think Jennifer always wanted children.
With one child and another on the way, the couple begin to squirrel away money to buy a home of their own.
Norton Fitzwarren's quite a small place, quite quiet. Only about 3,000 people live there, so more of a suburb of Taunton, really. We've got some new build estates around the edges.
Jennifer and Stephen's house hunting takes them to what appears to be the perfect location.
Dragon Rise is just off the main road through Norton Fitzwarren. Everyone had a back garden. There were schools nearby.
I think they were just happy that they had a place, and I think that's where they thought they'd settle down and stay forever.
Jennifer says it was a really lovely environment to bring children up in. Really great sense of community, amazing neighbours. Jennifer just moved in and slotted right in with everyone.
The Reeves just seemed like a normal family, like anybody else on that same estate.
Soon after moving in, the Chappells meet their next-door neighbours, Kaylee Reeves and her truck driver husband, Colin.
Colin Reeves was working for a transport company delivering extendable platforms around the country. He has two young daughters that were at the same local primary school, and Kaylee, his wife, was a mum.
The Reeveses had 2 daughters and the Chappells had 2 sons. They had that in common. They both had kids and they used to bump into each other on the school run.
I think quite early on they got on quite well, like they were friendly.
Colin Reeves was a bit quieter, maybe not as chatty as Kaylee. I didn't think they were uneasy about him. I think they just thought he was not a very extroverted person. One evening, Stephen was manoeuvring into his parking space and he bumped Colin Reeves's car and he caused quite a bit of damage.
Stephen was really embarrassed. He was genuinely a bit sort of, oh God, what have I done? And was very aware that everyone's children would be asleep. So he left it to Jennifer. Jennifer sent a message, you know, that we're really sorry, how do we rectify this?
It cost a couple of £1,000 to get it fixed.
While Stephen and Jennifer consider the matter closed, next door the Reeves aren't quite so happy with the way it was handled.
It does seem, from our records from that point, the relationship between the two families deteriorated somewhat.
If an issue, even if it seems quite minor at the time, isn't resolved, then there's a problem, because the feelings of resentment can fester over time. Nobody could have predicted that this innocent act of accidentally bashing into your neighbour's car could have set off a chain of events that eventually led to such a...
Colin came out.
You can't reverse in here when the car's here all the time.
Jennifer wasn't aggressive in her reply. It was just, yes, you can, like, I can, this is a free space. And it was niggly rather than aggressive. He'd obviously been stewing on it a little. He was automatically aggressive, which automatically made Jennifer a bit sort of on the back foot.
It felt like he was coming out just to try and maybe scare her, maybe try and show that he's got some sort of power, but I'm sure Colin probably didn't like her because she would happily actually argue back.
Colin Reeves couldn't understand why Jennifer Chappell would get another car when she didn't have the space for it. And Jennifer couldn't understand why he couldn't just get over it. I think they just butted heads, really. Colin Reeves came up with the idea of widening the parking space.
He'd laid some bricks in the communal area to widen his driveway, and at the top of that communal area was where cars would park. So it kind of made it so no one could park there, which made Jennifer and Stephen's life difficult when they now had two cars.
They asked him, you know, why he had done it, and he said that by widening his space, this had reduced the stress that he and Kaylee were going through as a result of the parking space issue.
The way that Reeves has dealt with this whole situation suggests that he's not a man that has the psychological skills to handle it in a more healthy and calmer manner, but instead somebody who's probably quite impulsive. He's the kind of person that will not express his emotions in a healthy manner, but rather bottle them up.
At this point, Jennifer was holding quite a lot of anger towards the Reeves, more from feeling like they were being a little petty.
And after 3 years, Jennifer and Kaylee's relationship has now also completely deteriorated.
It got to the point where Jennifer and Kaylee didn't want to run into each other on the school run anymore. Friendly neighbourliness had completely broken down.
There was tension between the mothers. Kaylee believed that Jennifer was shooting her looks or talking about her. Jennifer believed the same about Kaylee.
Kaylee would then tell Colin, or Colin would find out about these, and I think that really played on his mind because he really wanted to protect his family and his wife specifically.
Jennifer's on edge, so Stephen's on edge. Kaylee's on edge, so Colin's on edge. Everyone's feeling it. And Colin turns up at her place of work.
Jennifer is working in the cafe at the garden centre when she gets the feeling she's being watched.
Jennifer texted me and she said, Colin's come to my work and he's just sat here staring at me. He's got his arms crossed. He's watching me. He's not interacting with his children. He's just sat there. I believe he was there for well over 2 hours. Long time. To sit in a cafe and just watch someone. Why? It's very, very intimidating and then validating Jennifer's fear of the Reeves.
Jennifer said that he turned his chair to face her. It did seem a bit strange to go to the same place that your neighbour's working and turn your chair to stare at them.
It's possible that it was just a coincidence and Colin was just there with his children, but it really feels like this is done intentionally to be menacing and to be intimidating. And this must have been terrifying for Jennifer.
Colin Reeves joined the army when he was 17 and he passed the commando course, which is extremely difficult and quite grueling, and he was very proud to have passed that. He went to Afghanistan to Camp Bastion, and while he was there he was also a security guard on the prisoner of war camp where they held the suspected terrorists. So he had quite a varied and probably quite a harrowing time in Afghanistan.
And I believe it's at that point that, for me, the penny dropped that Jennifer was scared of something worse than a dispute, because Jennifer's words to me were, he's a trained killer and he's watching me.
It wasn't just a neighbourly dispute anymore, this had become personal.
The couple find that what had once been a happy home has become a prison.
Jennifer got more and more scared because of Colin's background in the army, and she just felt more scared to go out. And that's not really fair, because you should feel safe in the place you're living.
And next door, the Reeves are in a state of turmoil too.
I think by November 2021, Colin Reeves's mental state had deteriorated quite a bit. It was coming up to Remembrance Sunday, which was always very difficult for him as an army veteran. It was around then that he had a conversation with Kaylee, and he said that he just wasn't feeling himself. He thought that she would be better off without him, and he talked about his job and how depressed and lonely he felt driving the lorry all day. He was in quite a bad place mentally.
It does feel like he's unravelling. We know that he's got these mental health problems, and of course there's this ongoing dispute with the neighbours, and then on top of that he's got some marital problems. So to me it feels like the whole world around him is crumbling.
Jennifer Chappell came home to our house one night. She knew that the Reeveses had this camera that overlooked their parking space, and so she made a rude gesture at the camera.
Reeves has taken to watching the monitor of his CCTV camera, and Jennifer's action leaves him enraged.
Ultimately, only Colin Reeves knows why he set up a camera. I know he didn't like cameras, he didn't like feeling like he was on camera. He used to tape over the camera on his phone because maybe he thought people were spying on him. In his job as a lorry driver, there was a camera in his cab that videoed everything he was doing. That was something he really didn't like about his job.
The 11th of November is really important because it's Remembrance Day. And Colin obviously is an ex-soldier. I believe he dealt with his own demons that day.
Colin spends the morning at a remembrance event. Back at home, trouble is brewing.
Jennifer had seen the Reeves children hitting and spitting and trying to hurt her cats. She'd said over a text message, she's letting her kids just terrorise my cats. How is she letting that happen?
Jennifer confronted Kaylee about it and said, your children are kind of spitting at the cats, hissing at them. And I think Kaylee said something along the lines like, that's what children do. They were quite confrontational with each other.
Colin returns to find his wife Kaylee upset and angry. As Jennifer returns home, he suddenly approaches.
When she got out of her car and walked towards her front door, Colin Reeves appeared out of the darkness and accused Jennifer of gobbing off. And she said Kaylee started it and told him to F off.
What's that? You fat.
Once Colin came out of the darkness, both of them were firing on all cylinders. Colin Reeves was swearing at her, calling her all sorts of names, calling her fat.
She's the one who started it, so what's that? You fat.
He's really aggressive. I think Jennifer just wanted to get inside and out of the way of it because she didn't want anything to happen.
She was really scared when she goes back in that house. She calls me. I'm sat on the sofa with another friend who's gone, "This is horrible." I think that was the real moment that Jennifer feared for her life.
It was clear that any kind of diplomatic relations between the two families were gone by that stage. It was full-on war between them.
Jennifer and I were exchanging videos on a social media platform, and she voiced her concerns about Colin. "Danny, he is a trained killer. He's coming for me." I think that all made us stand up and take notice.
Colin Reeves went to the Christmas lights switch on in Taunton with his mum and his sister and his two daughters. He was surrounded by crowds and he found being in a crowded environment quite difficult after lockdown.
Colin Reeves arrives home shortly before 6 p.m. Next door, Stephen Chappell is marking homework. Jennifer is putting the boys to bed before settling down to watch TV.
It's Sunday, 21st of November 2021 in Dragon Rise. Cold evening, coming on towards Christmas.
3 hours later, the Chappell CCTV camera detects movement.
The CCTV is essentially motion activated. The first thing you see is a figure over the garden fence to the right, which is the direction of Colin Reeves' house. That person then crouches down underneath the windows at the back of the house. Then in the bottom corner, what appears to be a back door opening, and that opens quite quickly after he crouches down. And then very soon after that, you hear a really piercing scream.
The screams are too distressing to broadcast. They last well over 10 seconds.
When you listen to that, there's no doubt that that is somebody that is totally fearing for their life. Quite soon after the screams, that figure is seen leaving the back of the house and returning in the direction he came from.
The neighbours are alerted by the screams coming from Jennifer and Stephen's house.
They heard this screaming coming from next door. It was like nothing they'd ever heard before. It was terrible.
It's November, the windows are shut, the doors are shut in houses, and they hear these screams over the TV. And that led one of the neighbours to text within their WhatsApp group, one of the other neighbours saying, "Did you hear that scream?"
Texted Jennifer and he said, "Are you okay?" No response.
And that led them both, because the scream was so significant, to say, "Let's go and check everything's okay."
The door was unlocked and they went inside. And they went down the hall into the living room, and that was where they saw Jennifer and Stephen lying in a pool of blood on the living room floor.
I was stabbed.
When
Neighbour's husband and the mother.
Whereabouts have you been stabbed?
No, not me, the neighbours.
The neighbour's been stabbed by who?
By me.
By you?
Yes.
Right, okay.
Colin Reeves sounded very, not calm exactly, but very collected, considering what he'd just done.
How bad are the injuries?
They've both been stabbed.
Right, several times. All right, stay on the line for me, okay? Are you in your house on your own?
No, my wife, my children in bed.
All right, okay.
It feels like Reeves is doing his best to be cooperative. He's answering all the questions.
Tell me exactly what's happened. Take a deep breath.
You can even hear him, it sounds like he's sobbing, it sounds like he's crying.
I went round.
Yeah.
With a knife.
Okay.
The more of it you listen to, you hear him starting to breathe more heavily. There's longer gaps between what he's saying.
I've stabbed both of them.
All right, how many times?
I don't know, a couple of times each. 2 or 3 times each, maybe.
I think as he's speaking to the call handler, it's slowly the gravity of what he's done is starting to dawn on him.
Are they still conscious and breathing?
I don't think so, no.
Okay.
I think at that point he was shocked at himself.
Are they males or females?
One male, one female.
Okay.
But then you can nearly hear like the army veteran in him as well. Every time she asks him a question, he answers it succinctly, he answers it clearly.
What's your name?
Colin Reeves.
Alright, Colin. How are you spelling your surname?
R-E-E-V-E-S.
Alright.
But then you hear the man behind it who's struggling to come to terms with what's just happened. He's starting to realise what he's just done.
What kind of knife did you use?
It was a dagger.
Okay.
A couple of things that hit me from that call is he appears quite lucid, seems to understand what he's done.
Alright, just stay on the line for me, okay? We're going to get some help out there as soon as we can. Alright. So you stabbed them both several times?
Yes.
Quite coherent. It explains quite plainly what's occurred, answers the questions that the call handler puts to him.
Where's the knife now?
It's in my house.
Okay. Alright. You've done the right thing by calling us, okay?
Yeah.
So what was their situation when you left?
They were both, he was lying on the floor, she was lying on the sofa.
Right, okay. And were they awake? Were they...
No, I think they were sort of drifting.
I'm sure there's absolute turmoil going on in his head. He's probably thinking about the impact it's going to have on his wife and his own children. So a lot of very conflicting and very difficult thoughts all flooding in at once.
Even before the call has ended, police units from the whole area are scrambled.
When the police arrive at a crime scene, our first job is to preserve life and also assess what we were actually dealing with. They were met with absolutely horrendous circumstances. Two deceased people in the living room, 2 adults. Both had suffered a number of stab wounds to their torsos, and there was significant blood on the floor. And really, unfortunately, there's 2 young children asleep upstairs in their bedroom. Those children were removed from the premises quite quickly and taken to a safe place until we could establish who their next of kin was, essentially, so they could be with somebody that they knew and knew them.
Rumours of an incident on Dragon Rise spread quickly.
I have local alerts on my computer that ping up, and it said an incident was unfolding in Norton Fitzwarren. So I clicked on it. Then they dinged up a picture and it was Jennifer's door. All it said was a scene was unfolding, so I took to social media. The forefront of my mind was, is Jennifer okay? Has Jennifer been hurt?
Danny gets a message from a friend of Jennifer.
She said, I'm really sorry. She said, Jennifer's passed away. Without a shadow of a doubt, the second I heard Jennifer was dead, I knew it was Colin. There was no doubt in my mind that Colin had done it. She told us this was going to happen, and it did.
When the police officers went to arrest Colin Reeves from his house, it was pretty calm.
Put your hands up.
Not me, mate, him.
You?
Go in the house. Then.
Right. His demeanour was one of somebody that was resigned to the fact he was going to be arrested.
Hold still. Listen, you're under arrest at the minute on the attempted murder of 2 people inside the address next door. Do you understand? Okay. Let's walk over here a minute, out the way.
To me, it seems that Reeves is just completely dazed. You know, he's just stunned, he's stupefied. So I think the enormity of the situation and the consequences of what he's done is flooding into his mind. But at the same time, he was pretty much cooperative with the police. He was following instructions. It didn't look like he was suffering from acute symptoms of mental illness at that time.
Let's walk over here.
Although he's committed what at that stage we believe is a really serious offence, we still need to worry about the safeguarding of Colin Reeves. Yeah, having committed this offence, what sort of effect is that going to have on him and his mental health at that stage?
Reeves is taken directly to a police custody suite.
How are you feeling yourself, bro? How are you feeling in yourself now? Confused. Okay.
But having him in a custody suite We're able to monitor him lifetime to make sure that he's not going to do himself any harm and he can't cause danger to anybody else.
Under questioning, it's as though the former soldier believes he's back in Afghanistan.
Probably a lot to take in, right?
Message from my stepsister, and it said something like, you know, are you awake? Can you talk? And it's like urgent. And I thought, that's a bit strange. She called me and said, Jennifer and Stephen have been murdered. I thought, this is a prank. What's going on? What's happened? I've just woken up. My brain's not quite with it enough. And she said, yep, they've been murdered. I was like, the boys, where are the boys? Are they okay? Are they alive? She said, yep, they're fine. I just screamed into my pillow because my son was still asleep. I thought, I can't wake him.
On Monday morning, police forensic teams enter the chapel's home.
I've got Colin Reeves in custody initially for 24 hours, which I can then get extended up to 96 hours. But I need to recover that evidence quickly. I need to be in a position to be able to charge Colin Reeves within that time period.
Neil Mead hurries to piece together how and why the killings occurred.
It's quite a small house, just kitchen and a living room downstairs, with a door onto the back garden, and both Stephen and Jennifer were in that room, and there was very little sign of disturbance elsewhere within the premises. This is something that happened very, very quickly. It wasn't a situation where Stephen or Jennifer were able to react.
For the first 3 days after Jennifer and Stephen were murdered, the children didn't know. We took their oldest to the park, and he said, have Mummy and Daddy done a bad thing? Are they with the police? And all we thought was, we wish that's what it was. We talked to Stephen's sister, and she said, we'll do it together. We'll tell them together. They both came and sat on my lap, cuddling up to me. I told them, do you remember how Mummy talked about Grandad, who is no longer with us? You know, he's up in heaven. And I said, well, Mummy and Daddy have joined him. They're okay. They're watching over you. At that point, their oldest made the worst noise, like the proper horrible cry. And I will never forget. It was one of the hardest days of my life. It really was.
Throughout the interview process, Colin Reeves answered no comments to every question.
Despite having admitted the killings in his 999 call, he is now less willing to talk.
Tell me what happened yesterday in Dragon Rise that led to the deaths of Jennifer and Stephen Chaplin.
He sat forward in his chair. It's a typical position that somebody would sit in being interviewed for such a serious offence when the gravity of what's happened is starting to come to the forefront of their mind, and that the impact that's going to have on him for the rest of his life alongside the victims.
When you were being assessed in the custody unit here, you said, I shouldn't have done it, I've ruined their lives and mine. Can I just confirm, did you say that?
No comment.
And what did you mean by that?
No comment.
The next stage would be to get the forensic post-mortems of Stephen and Jennifer completed, which will give me a cause of death. In Stephen and Jennifer's case, they were both found to have died from 6 stab wounds. So that tells me that he's gone there intended to kill him, and has done it very quickly once he's inside the premises.
When we actually look at the attacks, they were ferocious and they were efficient, but somehow they don't feel frenzied. So I think what we can garner from that is that there was actually a calmness and a cold calculation in terms of Colin Reeves's state of mind at the time.
All right. What kind of knife did you use?
It was a dagger.
Okay.
And the stab wounds had the telltale diamond pattern of a very particular type of blade.
The dagger we believe was used in the murder is what's called a Fairburn Sykes dagger, and it's the traditional dagger of the Commando Regiment.
Detectives believe they can see it in Reeves' hand as he enters the chapel's home.
When Colin Reeves left the army, he was given a presentation frame which had a dagger as the centerpiece.
It was something that army veterans got. It was a kind of a prestige thing. And we know now that he took the dagger out of the frame.
Reeves makes an active choice to use the ceremonial dagger. It probably would have been quicker and easier for him to just walk into his kitchen and grab a knife rather than smash the frame where it was. And I don't think that's a coincidence. I think it's somehow symbolic to Reeves.
Another bit of evidence we gained was a recording device, an Alexa-type device within the Reeves house.
And specialist investigators are able to find something in the memory of that device that finally suggests a motive for these brutal killings.
We were able to recover from that a small clip which supported the theory we had that there'd been an argument, a disagreement between Colin Reeves and his wife immediately prior to the offence.
He came home from the Christmas lights switch on and he went upstairs where his wife Kaylee was watching TV, and he said, "I've been feeling lonely," and she says, "Well, so have I."
Reeves tries to talk to his wife about his struggles with his mental health.
She said, "There's only so many years I can take this," and it was at that point that she suggested that they should separate for 2 weeks as a sort of trial. Colin left the bedroom and then sat down on the stairs. He said that he cried and he felt a fear of losing everything, of losing his family, his kids, his wife. At that point he would have been quite close to the military plaque on the wall, which had the dagger in it.
Colin probably hit rock bottom because it means that he has to reassess his life, his future, maybe even his own personality traits. The potential breakup with his wife, I think, is a huge trigger point.
Investigators formally charge Colin Reeves with the murders of Jennifer and Stephen Chappell. But Reeves decides to contest the case.
I was very, very angry to hear that he'd pleaded not guilty. I was like, he has to be guilty, you know, he's admitted.
It was my first trial in my first job as a journalist, so I wasn't really sure what to expect. I think the fact that Reeves was an ex-soldier and that this had been a neighbourly dispute that had got out of hand had really drawn in a lot of journalists. The public gallery was absolutely packed.
As the trial of Colin Reeves begins, the veteran of the war in Afghanistan stuns the courtroom by pleading not guilty to the murders of Stephen and Jennifer Chappell on the grounds of diminished responsibility.
Diminished responsibility is a psychiatric defence. It's only relevant for murder and it downgrades it to manslaughter. The defendant and his defence team, on the strength of psychiatric expert evidence, has to prove that at the time of the killing they were suffering from an abnormal state of mind that affected either his ability to understand his conduct or to form a rational judgment or to exhibit self-control.
It just didn't add up. We were like, why is he doing diminished responsibility? Surely he knew what he was doing because he's the one that's called the police. He knows he's killed 2 people. So it just didn't make sense at all.
We understand that he has mental health struggles and we're not without, you know, I don't want to use the word sympathy, but understanding that people struggle with their mental health, but that does not mean that you get away with what you did to our friends.
Reeves' defence claims the combination of the Christmas lights he visited and the proximity of the war memorial triggered an episode of post-traumatic stress disorder.
When somebody's experiencing a genuine severe post-traumatic stress disorder flashback, they're transported back in time to the traumatic event like war. So everything around them, whether it's the visual sights, whether it's sounds, whether it's the feeling of panic, feels absolutely real.
In court we heard from his wife about when he was in Afghanistan.
She describes how he changed upon his return from the war zone.
He came home in 2009 and there'd been some sort of a skirmish or a scuffle with somebody else while he was in the army, and that meant that he was sent home without having a chance to decompress, which most military people do. You know, after they've been to somewhere like Afghanistan, they go on a kind of a holiday and they decompress and try and put it all behind them. But Colin Reeves didn't get the chance to do that because he was sent straight home. I think it was a very sad trial, and there were bits of it that were very difficult to cover. Certainly the audio of the moment the Chappells were murdered was incredibly difficult to hear.
The sound of Jennifer's dying screams shocks everyone present.
Family members left the court for those moments, but we heard it, and I don't think I'll ever forget what I heard in that courtroom when Mr. and Mrs. Chappell's last moments were played out.
I think I allowed myself to listen to it for closure. It didn't sound like Jennifer, but obviously you knew it was. And it was horrifying.
Reeves may have refused to comment under interrogation, but the 999 call he made is a key piece of evidence, played to the jury by the prosecution.
Tell me exactly what's happened.
I went round.
Yeah.
With a knife.
Okay.
I've stabbed both of them.
All right. What kind of knife did you use?
It was a dagger.
So you stabbed them both several times?
Yes.
The jury's reaction to listen to that call was disbelief, and it really focuses them about what we're dealing with here. You know, you've got two people that are dead, and a man phoning the police to say, this is what I've done.
I felt very angry listening to his voice from the call, thinking that he's just taken two wonderful people off this planet. He's orphaned two children. I was confused. If you've just gone and done that, why would you call the police?
The court is once again packed as Colin Reeves takes the stand. He reads from a pre-prepared statement.
He described feeling ashamed and disgusted by what he had done. He said he couldn't believe that he had taken the Chappells away from their children and left their children with no parents. And he just seemed completely remorseful for what he had done and really confused by his behaviour.
I was crying at it, not because it was sad, because I was so angry. I was like, how can he stand up on the stand and read that out? I don't think there's anything he could say to have made me feel better at all.
After hearing nearly 2 weeks of evidence, the jury retires to consider its verdict.
We were sat there and it felt like time was just going so slowly.
The jury takes just over 5 hours to reach their conclusion.
Reeves' proposal and that of his defence team that he had post-traumatic stress disorder was rejected. If he was suffering from a flashback at the time of the Christmas light celebration, he would have acted out aggressively, potentially at that moment in time. It doesn't make sense to me that he would have had that experience, then managed to drive all the way home and still be agitated and still be in the midst of a flashback. And it also wouldn't explain why he attacked his neighbours.
We all sat with Jennifer at the grave and listened to the sentencing on the phone. We felt it was something that we wanted to be with Jen. We couldn't take her with us, so we went and sat with her.
The judge sentences Reeves to 38 years in prison, telling him, "You stabbed your victims in their own home and left their children as orphans."
And it was a huge sigh of relief. And all of us just in unison, tears streaming down our faces because we couldn't react.
I was satisfied that justice had been obtained for Jennifer and Stephen and their children and their family.
I'm fascinated by Colin Reeves' actual mental state at the time of the killings. He strikes me as somebody who's actually a very paranoid individual, possibly related to the trauma that he's seen. There were marital difficulties and he potentially was on the verge of splitting up with his wife. So I think maybe he harboured some anger and resentment potentially towards her, but because he loves her, he instead is displacing it onto the neighbours.
Not long after the trial ends, Rhonda, Jennifer's sister, has a baby daughter.
She's named after my sister because I wanted her name to carry on. I didn't want it to get stuck. She deserved to carry on, even if it means I'm going to be raising a little version of my big sister.
My first ever school was over in the distance there. That's where I met Jennifer. But this whole town tells the story of Jennifer, and one of her favourite views is of the tour. This is my favourite photograph that I have of Jennifer. It's Jennifer and Stephen on their wedding day. They are really, really good memories. Really good memories. It's not a sadness when I look at them. It's sad that I can't make more.
An outgoing and vivacious mother.
Everybody that met her loved her. She would make, like, everyday fun.
She was vibrant, happy. She was the life of the party.
Is savagely murdered.
The level of brutality that was involved in the actual murder was just shocking. Her throat was slashed almost to the point where she was decapitated.
Police hunt for an elusive killer.
We had nothing to tell us what happened. Crime scene evidence produced basically nothing.
We couldn't figure out who did it and why they did it. We were really baffled.
Could have been anybody.
And follow a twisted trail of evidence.
Why would he use a calling card?
There were 44 phone calls made up until the day of the murder.
The officer found a loaded handgun and hollow point bullets. It kind of lit up like a light bulb.
Until a desperate move.
This was really the one shot that the police had to solve this case.
Reveals a secret that stuns everyone.
I was very surprised, like I was shocked. All of us were. I never would have expected that it would lead to this.
At 10:27 p.m. on a cold Tuesday in January 2003, Ramapo Police Dispatch receives an emergency call.
Ramapo 911. My neighbor just ran in my house and said his wife is on the floor in the house. He's here and he's sort of like in a state of shock.
Let me talk to him on the phone.
All right, hold on a minute.
Yes. Sir, I have help on the way. You stay right where you are until the officers get there. Do you know if your wife is breathing?
No, she didn't answer me.
Did you check to see if she was
breathing? No, I walked into her room. The lights don't go on.
Okay, does she have any injuries?
Yes, she's got blood on her.
Where?
When I cried, Evelyn, she didn't move.
Did you come home and find her that way?
I just came home.
Officers are dispatched to the home, located in a quiet family neighborhood.
When I initially approached the house, I see a man with a young boy with this really blank face. Walking by, he didn't say anything to me. I noticed that he had a shopping bag. It looked like a gallon of milk. I enter the home and go upstairs to the back rear bedroom to give this woman aid, only to find that I was at the scene of a murder. You know, her injuries were so severe. She's clearly dead. She has a very deep laceration to her neck, and she has what appears to be a knife handle sticking out of her chest. And the blood is just pooled around her body. To me, it looked like the blood was still moving. And I was thinking to myself, this just happened. It could be that the killer's still in the house. So myself and another police officer went room by room and cleared the house, and we didn't find anybody else inside. At that point now, I had to secure the crime scene. I knew that it was dark, but once it's a crime scene, you try not to touch anything because you don't know what is evidence.
Detectives arrive on the scene and begin their investigation in the bedroom.
The victim was lying on her back, and she had a tremendously deep wound to her neck. So deep so, you could see part of her spine. There appeared to be 2 stab wounds to her chest, and there was a large, I would call it a kitchen knife, sticking in her chest. We, of course, dusted the knife for fingerprints, which came back negative.
The actual blade had gone through her and was stuck into the parquet wood floor. You know, it was a pretty brutal scene.
She didn't appear to be dead for long. Her body was cold to the touch, but there was no rigor mortis. There was no lividity. We looked at a potential attack of a sexual nature, There was nothing obvious to the eye. Her clothing was not disturbed. I looked for any defensive wounds. If there was a struggle, there'd be some indication on her hands, and none of that was evident.
The brutality of her injuries and how many times she had been stabbed, it looked more like what we would call a crime of passion.
Looking around the room, investigators discover some unusual clues.
I found it kind of odd that there was no lights, but the fan in the ceiling was running. The fan light had no light bulbs in it. And in the garbage basket were 3 light bulbs, and there was one on the floor next to it. And I'm like, that just, what's this all about? And there was a wall sconce that had a light bulb that was loosened. To me, it would be indicative of somebody looking to hide their presence, lessen the ability of the victim to see them.
The house was a little bit in disarray, but it didn't look like it had been ransacked or that it was part of a burglary.
There was some expensive tools in the garage. There was quite a bit of silverware, which is a burglar. They would take that, I would think.
Nothing really of value was taken, and so that started raising more questions of what exactly happened here.
Police examine the exterior of the house for evidence.
We didn't see any types of breaks in the windows or the screens. Everything appeared to be locked and secure. On the ground, you could see a set of footprints in the snow that led to the back door. And that door wasn't broken open, but it was open just slightly. That could have been a point of entry for whoever had done this to her.
Investigators speak with the homeowner, Peter Visich. He tells police the victim is his wife, 36-year-old Evelyn Visich, and that they live in the house with their 2-year-old son, Ryan.
Peter told the police he'd gotten home with his son and that he observed that something happened to his wife. When the police spoke to Peter and explained to him what exactly happened to his wife, Evelyn, it was a strange reaction.
He just sort of had a very stale face. That was something that was odd to me, but it certainly didn't point any fingers at him. There was no blood and nothing in his hands or on him or on his clothes that would indicate that he had been part of the murder.
While Peter is taken to headquarters to make a statement, Ryan is looked after by his grandparents. At the crime scene, investigators continue to look for any clues to who has killed Evelyn Visich.
In these early stages, you don't really know the victim, and so now you have to start thinking, who would do that, and what was the reason for this brutality that was leveled against this victim?
Born to a single mother in Lares, Puerto Rico in 1966, Evelyn grew up determined to escape her humble childhood.
She came to this country from Puerto Rico when she was 19 to live the American dream.
Evelyn landed a job at a large home improvement store in Paramus, New Jersey, where she made an immediate impression.
Evelyn was a great employee. She had such a good work ethic. Everybody loved her.
She was vibrant, positive. You could hear Evelyn from a mile away. She was always happy. She loved her music. She was passionate about dancing. She was a proud Latina.
She was beautiful inside and out. Such a giving person. She was very kind.
Evelyn started dating Peter after they met at the store.
Peter used to shop there with his father. He was very quiet, very polite, family-oriented. He seemed like a good guy. Someone that she could see building a family with. That was her dream.
Peter and Evelyn married and soon welcomed their son Ryan into the family.
Ryan was her world. Everyone knew she had a son, and everyone knew how much she loved her son.
After 4 years of marriage, the couple's relationship deteriorated, and Evelyn filed for divorce.
Things started to go wrong. They were just very disconnected. But she wanted Peter to be a part of Ryan's life while they figured out their divorce and custody agreement.
But Evelyn was killed before the divorce was finalized, raising police suspicions due to the nature of her murder.
The ferocity, the level of violence, you would think somebody really had an axe to grind, someone that's personally involved with the victim.
You looked at the nature of the crime, it suggested that it was somebody doing this for a reason. You have a couple who are going through a divorce, In these types of cases, you're going to look at the husband.
Coming up, police discover additional suspects.
We learned that he had been with Evelyn the night of the murder.
Maybe they were having a domestic argument, a dispute.
And unearth hidden evidence.
Evelyn had secretly audio taped some of the arguments and fights that they had been having.
But just as the investigation falters,
maybe he wasn't the one who actually did the murder because it just doesn't make sense.
Was there a piece of the puzzle that we weren't seeing?
A new face blows the case wide open.
He's perspiring heavily. I could see the vein in his neck beating. And I said to him, I said, I don't want to hear what you have to say. I already know what happened, and I'm going to prove it.
Police investigating the murder of mother of one, Evelyn Visage, have their first suspect, her estranged husband, Peter Visage.
You have to start thinking, did the husband do this? Or is he involved in it somehow?
Peter mentioned that his relationship with Evelyn was troubling to him because they were in a different place. He wanted her to stay home, she wanted to work, and the relationship deteriorated, and Evelyn had filed for divorce.
Evelyn and Peter still lived in the same home, even though this divorce was proceeding. They slept in separate bedrooms, but they were living under the same roof.
Peter claims he last saw Evelyn alive the morning she was killed.
He had taken his son for the day. Evelyn had gone to work.
Peter told us he went to his mother's house at 8:30 that morning with Ryan to do some household repairs. He didn't have a steady job. His parents supported him. He also did a lot of odd jobs for them that they paid him for. He stayed at his mother's house till approximately 8:30, and at that time he went with his son Ryan to the Palisades Mall.
Peter tells police that just after 9 p.m., he called Evelyn's cell, and she told him she was at a friend's house.
She told Peter that she was on her way home and would probably be home within 20 minutes or so. At approximately 10 p.m., Peter received a telephone call from Evelyn asking where he was. Peter said to Evelyn that he was picking up milk and that he would be home shortly. Peter said that upon arriving home, his intent was to put Ryan to bed, but he said that he found it odd that the lights were not working in the hallway. He said he looked into the bedroom, he saw that Evelyn was on the floor, and he said that she was obviously deceased, according to him, and he ran back downstairs and ran to the neighbor's house to call the police.
Peter Visage was questioned for over 16 hours. I mean, it was a very long interview. He never asked to leave. He never said, you know, I want a lawyer, leave me alone, anything like that. He was cooperative throughout.
He agreed to provide us with fingernail clippings, hair samples, blood sample, a buccal swab for his DNA.
As Peter is providing samples, investigators run a background check.
There was nothing in his history indicative of this violence. Peter was typically a guy who was, if he wasn't home, working on cars, motorcycles, he was at his parents' house. Peter Visage's mother confirmed his alibi for the day and evening at the time that he said that he was there. We found Peter to be at the A&P supermarket buying milk and exiting the store consistent with the times he described, confirmed by video cameras. And he produced a receipt for the milk, time and date stamped 10:15 p.m. The amount of time it took to go from A&P, where he purchased the milk, to his house, it just would not have been possible to commit that crime and call the police from the neighbor's phone and not be contaminated in some sort or leave behind some evidence or have evidence on him. We found no sign of any injuries. We found no sign of any blood on his person, on his shoes.
At this point in the investigation, there was nothing that we could find that was showing that Peter Visage was involved in the murder of his wife. He was in all these different places where there were surveillance cameras, and with a timeline that prevented him from being at the scene of the murder when it occurred. Now you have to start thinking, other than Peter Visage, who could do something like this, and why would they do something like this?
I asked him, did he have any concern about his own safety? You know, somebody came into your house, maybe they were looking for you too. Does he have any enemies? Does he owe anybody money? Does he have any illegal habits, drugs, gambling? And he answered no to all those questions. And I asked him if he knew anybody that might want to do this. And he said that she did have a boyfriend and that we should look at him. Evelyn was dating another employee of Home Depot, Mike Granda.
Here you have people going through a divorce, and now you have a boyfriend thrown into the mix.
A motive could be jealousy, could be a fight in their relationship. The fact that she still lives with Peter could be a source of upsetment for Mike Granda.
Maybe it was a jealous boyfriend who had come in there. It fit the profile for the crime scene, being that it was so horrific.
The next morning, police head to Evelyn's work to interview her boyfriend, Mike, and find that her coworkers already suspect something is wrong.
I remember I kept calling her because Evelyn was always at work by the time I got there, and she wasn't there that day. I saw detectives when they came in, and I got suspicious. And I said, something happened to Evelyn, right? So the detective said to me, how would you know that? So what I said was, you just confirmed it to me.
We interviewed Evelyn's co-workers, and to a person, they all loved her and spoke highly of her. And she had some very close relationships with people that she worked with that loved her dearly, that she was good to them, they were good to her, they looked out for each other.
Evelyn was very, very loved at work. Emotionally, it was horrible. I mean, we were her friends. We were her family.
She wasn't just a friend, like she was like a big sister to me.
As investigators speak with Evelyn's coworkers, her boyfriend, Mike Granda, arrives to start his shift.
When Mike Granda arrived for work, we told him that Evelyn had been murdered. He was visibly upset.
But when detectives ask Mike where he was the night before, his answer raises eyebrows.
According to Mike Granda, he had been with Evelyn the night of the murder.
At that point, you have to really look at every possibility. Maybe she was going back to her husband, maybe she had broken up with him, maybe it was a crime of passion, maybe they were having a domestic argument, a dispute. We had to look at him as a possible suspect for the murder.
Of Evelyn Visage are focusing in on the man she was dating while in the throes of divorcing her husband.
We did look at Evelyn's boyfriend, Mike Granda. There could be a source of jealousy based on the fact that she still lives with her husband during this process, so he has to be looked at.
Detectives bring the 28-year-old to the station for questioning.
When Michael Granda was interviewed, we asked him to describe their relationship. He said initially they were just friends, but as time went on, they became romantically involved and began dating.
Investigators press Mike for details on the night that Evelyn was killed.
According to Mike Granda, Evelyn and he had left Home Depot at approximately 3 p.m. Evelyn had gone to the Garden State Plaza Mall to return some clothes, and she actually was supposed to be having dinner with her son that night. But Peter called Evelyn and said, I'm going to my mother's house with the baby. So Evelyn called Michael saying that she was free, so she went from the shopping mall to Michael Granda's house in West New York, New Jersey.
Mike claims he and Evelyn had dinner. Around 9 p.m., Peter called to say he was on his way back with Ryan, after which Evelyn decided to head home to see her son.
Michael Granda's house is approximately a 40-minute drive to the Visage house. Michael Granda called her when she was approximately 20 minutes from home when she was on the Garden State Parkway. Approximately 40 minutes after that phone call, Evelyn was being murdered. We asked him to describe his whereabouts. He said that he had stayed home for the rest of the night, watched TV, and went to bed. So there was a window of opportunity where he did not have an alibi that could be corroborated by someone else. We subpoenaed his phone records to try to determine where he was. Michael's cell phone records indicated that his cell phone was in his apartment or very close by his apartment in West New York, New Jersey. If he were to drive from West New York, in all likelihood, he would have to pass through a toll. We subpoenaed toll records, Easy Pass records. We subpoenaed some cameras, video records from some banks in the area looking for his car passing by, and none of that was ever found. So that also led us to believe that he was telling the truth. He actually was in his home at the time that Evelyn was being murdered.
I never thought for 1 second that Mike had anything to do with it. Mike really lifted her up on a pedestal. He gave her that support that she needed. Mike made her feel beautiful.
Michael was most cooperative. He offered his phone, he offered his laptop computer, he offered samples of his blood, a buccal swab for DNA, hair. He offered everything. He said, please, I know you have to look at me, cross me off the list and find out who did this.
It just never even dawned on me that the police would look at me. I just tried to give them as much information as I could. I do remember telling them, like, oh, I know you guys have to suspect me. I told them if they wanted to search my house, they could. If they wanted to search my cars, they could. I was just very focused on trying to be helpful.
After the police obtained all of the information from Mike and speaking with him and speaking with others, he was quickly ruled out as a suspect in the murder of Evelyn Visage. And there was just nothing to suggest that Peter Visage was involved. So if you don't believe the husband's involved, you don't believe the boyfriend's involved, you have to look at other individuals that may be involved.
At that point, you know, could have been anybody. You can't make assumptions on who it could be. You have to really look at every possibility.
The day after Evelyn's murder, as police consider possible suspects, news of the crime hits the airwaves.
The Evelyn Visage murder was newsworthy just because of the area.
We're in a small town. We don't have that many murders that it's commonplace.
This was a case that really was troubling because you have a woman who was violently, brutally killed, and we couldn't figure out who did it and why they did it.
Hoping for a new lead, investigators look to the autopsy report to learn more about the crime.
She had 2 stab wounds in her upper back area. Those were the initial strikes. And then she had a very deep slash wound to her throat. And then there were 2 stab wounds in her upper chest area, powerfully done as indicative by the fact that the knife was stuck in the floor. Based on what the medical examiner described to us, I can only imagine the sheer horror that Evelyn was experiencing.
The level of brutality that was involved in the actual murder was just shocking. Her throat was slashed almost to the point where she was decapitated. It was blood-curdling.
She must have been scared. Somebody's in her home, she's in her bedroom. Maybe it was a burglary gone bad and she came home and had startled whoever was in her house.
We circled back to examining parolees in the area, both New York and New Jersey, sex offenders, people that have committed similar crimes, burglaries gone bad or robberies gone bad. At the time of Evelyn Visage's murder, there was a group of young men who were committing robberies and burglaries in the vicinity, including a Terrence Monk, who lived approximately 5 miles from the Visage residence.
I do remember that we were having burglaries in the area, and I remember that we were having home invasions too. The name Terrence Monk, like it clicked with me.
There were cases, robberies, burglaries, and assaults where Terrence Monk committed violent acts on people that didn't cooperate. He was also implicated in a robbery probably 1.5 miles from the Visage house. It kind of lit up like a light bulb. He certainly went right up to the top of the list.
Police are investigating if a violent local burglar might be responsible.
Terrence Monk was like a known criminal, and the detectives had been dealing with him for years at that point.
We had been investigating him so arduously and for such a long time, there was not any possibility of cooperation on his behalf.
To get the information they need, investigators take a different approach.
I utilized a confidential informant to try to determine where Terrence Monk was and if, in fact, he was involved in this crime. He described to me where Terrence Monk was at the time that Evelyn was murdered. He told us that Terrence Monk was in Buffalo, New York, and that was substantiated by witness statements and his cell phone records.
It's another dead end for detectives. They press the informant for any other information that might help solve the case.
This young man was so plugged in the criminal community, so I asked him what the word on the street was. If it was a local guy, chances are, in the criminal community, somebody would have been talking. And he said there's nothing on the street at all. No information about who killed Evelyn Visage.
With no other leads, police re-canvass the neighborhood around the Visage home.
There was multiple attempts to locate witnesses, and detectives actually went back and conducted a road stop in the area, hoping that somebody may have seen something. Nothing was discovered, and we couldn't gain anything from that. In the village of Chestnut Ridge, it's prohibited to park a vehicle on the street at night. So we also checked to see if any parking tickets had been issued or any vehicles parked on the street, and there were none found.
Collectively, between the police and the prosecution, we were really sitting there thinking this may never get solved.
While investigators consider their next move, Evelyn's loved ones struggle to accept her loss.
I just couldn't believe that she was killed. Evelyn was such a loved person by everyone. Something like that happening to her, it makes no sense.
You know, there's some people that come into your life for a reason, a season, or a lifetime. That's what they say. There was a lot of respect and love there.
She would make like everyday fun, always laughing, having a good time. But, you know, that's life. I mean, you have to take every second you get because you never know when it's going to end.
Detectives re-interview Evelyn's friends and colleagues, hoping to uncover a tiny detail that leads them to her killer.
We did speak to many of Evelyn's friends to find out if she had a lifestyle that was potentially dangerous to her or would expose her to this type of demise.
Her life revolved around her being a mother.
She had no enemies.
Everybody that met her loved her. There was not one person that met her that did not instantly take to her. She was just a really pleasant person to be around all the time, day and night.
It was very puzzling. What happened and why was this done?
With a violent killer still on the streets, concern spreads through the community.
In this area, this little hamlet of Chestnut Ridge, it's just not that kind of an area where you would expect anything like this. People in the community are starting to get fearful.
I remember I was living alone, and I certainly had my radar up, and I was very careful coming and going, almost to the point of paranoia. I wasn't going to be a victim.
3 days after Evelyn's murder, detectives receive explosive new information, turning the investigation on its head.
Mike Granda came to the Round Pole police station with some personal items of Evelyn Visage's. Amongst those personal items, we found audio tapes and a journal that she wrote in.
Detectives immediately recognized the voices on the audio tapes as Evelyn and her husband, Peter.
Evelyn apparently had secretly audio taped some of the arguments and fights that they had been having. Everything from any money that she spent, taking the car away from her, shutting off her phone. He wanted to be completely in control of Evelyn, so it was in stark contrast to what Peter described to us. The fact that Peter didn't describe any turmoil caused us to have some doubts about how truthful he was being.
Evelyn's journal contains even more startling revelations about their divorce.
He wanted custody. He was told that he wasn't going to get full custody, and he wanted the sale of the house. So if Evelyn is gone, he's got the child, he's got the sale of the house, and he can move on.
When detectives try to follow up with Peter about these revelations, they're met with silence.
At this point, Peter had retained an attorney, and we were no longer able to question him. So that again raised some suspicion. We went back and looked harder at Peter, based on the fact that he had the most to gain from Evelyn being dead.
With Peter having an ironclad alibi, investigators consider other scenarios.
Maybe he wasn't the one who actually did the murder, but you have to wonder if somehow Peter is involved in this, because it just doesn't make sense that anybody else had a reason to do this.
The suspicion is enough to get a warrant to search Peter's vehicle.
We had no idea at the time that that search of the van was about to unleash a whole new avenue of this investigation and turn this case totally upside down.
New evidence in the Evelyn Visage homicide investigation has led police to revisit her husband, Peter, as a potential suspect, and they are now searching his vehicle for any trace of incriminating evidence.
You just never know what might be that little piece. You know, whether it's a hair or a fingerprint or that one bit of DNA might be the break in the case.
Desperate for any lead in their investigation, police make a critical discovery.
There was an extensive search of Peter's van, and we uncovered in the back pocket of the middle seat of the van $3,700 in cash in a white envelope. In addition to the money that was found, there was a Sprint calling card.
This was tremendous evidence that we have just now uncovered. It offered a lot of questions.
Why would a person have $3,700 cash? We examined Peter's financial status. At the time, Peter was not very solvent in terms of having any money. Somebody who's, by all accounts, broke, and he's got $3,700 in the back of his van. And of course, we couldn't ask him why, because he had already retained counsel.
You have to now start wondering, why does this man have $3,700 in $100 bills left behind in his minivan?
It's possible that Peter may have engaged someone to kill Evelyn, and that money was going to be used to pay off the final payment.
Furthest thing from my mind was that a hitman could have been hired. That's really very rare in real life. Let's look at his bank accounts, his credit card statements, things like that, as far as getting any solid evidence he was involved in this.
We went back and looked harder at Peter's bank accounts, stock market, anything like that, in an effort to see if he had taken any money out to try to pay somebody to maybe do this, and nothing was found to be out of the ordinary or even considered to be like a payoff.
Finding no evidence Peter paid to have Evelyn killed, detectives focus on the other item found in his van.
Why would he use a calling card? Most folks, unless you don't have a cell phone or don't have a landline, don't have the necessity for a calling card. And Peter had a cell phone, he had a home phone, so we subpoenaed the records for that calling card.
There were 44 phone calls made from that prepaid phone card records beginning in November of 2002 up until the day of the murder in January of 2003.
Of 44 calls made on that card, almost all of them were made to an individual named Frank Thon.
The name is new to detectives, but when they run it through the police database, they make a telling discovery.
Police learned that Frank Thon was currently, at the time, in jail in the state of New Jersey.
This is a man who's been arrested numerous times, assaults, violent assaults. His most recent arrest was for driving while intoxicated. The officer found a loaded handgun underneath the armrest of the truck and hollow point bullets. At the time of the murder, he was on intensive supervised parole. Shortly after the Visage homicide, Frank Thon turned himself in to serve a year in the county jail.
Could there be an innocent explanation why Peter called a known violent criminal for months leading up to the murder, only to stop the day Evelyn was killed?
We subpoenaed Frank Thon's phone records. Analyzing his phone records, we found that he was in the vicinity of the Visage home on January 6th, the day before the murder, and on January 7th, the day of the murder. Then it became really evident to us that he was involved in this.
So now things are starting to click. We were able to secure a search warrant to search Frank Thon's apartment. And one of the things that the police recovered was a computer. Upon forensic investigation of that computer, we found that Frank Thon had searched directions from his apartment to the Visage home.
The evidence is compelling, but investigators need something more concrete to lay charges.
Based on the evidence that we had, it still was a very weak case. We don't have any forensic evidence that would connect him to the murder of Evelyn Visage.
You need the probable cause, you need the connection to prove your case and to actually have it stick.
With little else to go on, detectives make a bold decision.
We had no other option other than to go at Frank Thon. We knew our case would depend upon Frank Thon making a confession.
This was really the one shot that the police had to solve this case. It was a huge gamble because if he decided to ask for a lawyer, they could not question him anymore. If he denied it, they were stuck with what he had to say.
Police can only hope that Frank reveals the truth of whether Peter was involved in the murder.
We don't have a case against Peter. We're getting closer to figuring out maybe what occurred, but again, it doesn't prove that Peter Visage had any relationship to this murder.
We had nothing other than just the fact that Peter is calling Frank Thon. This case is going to rise and fall, whether we succeed or not with an interview.
Investigators head to the county jail to confront the hardened criminal.
I specifically requested a small room where we could have the table against the wall, and we deliberately set that room up to increase Frank Thon's anxiety. We had lawyer boxes with Evelyn Visich's name on the boxes. We had maps with pins in them. The small office was full of, as I call it, a number of props.
With everything in place, police bring in 41-year-old Frank Thon.
They took the handcuffs off him, and we pretty much just stared at him for like a good minute or two, again, in an attempt to increase his anxiety. And he was visibly nervous. And I said to him, I said, I don't want to hear what you have to say. I already know what happened, and I'm going to prove it. And I'm going to tell you what, a murder for hire in New York, you could potentially face the death penalty. We told him that we had all types of evidence implicating him, and his face hit the table. He's perspiring heavily. His heart rate was obviously increased. I could see the vein in his neck beating. And I said to him, I said, you don't have any friends in this world right now. I said, if you tell us the truth, we'll try to assist you in getting the best possible deal. There was a long pause. He took a big sigh, and then he began to tell us what happened.
Weeks after the murder of Evelyn Visich, investigators have just convinced suspected hitman Frank Thon to start talking.
He almost had a look of detachment from what was going on. He took a big sigh and he says, all right, I'll tell you guys what happened. Frank Thon told us that he was the person who killed Evelyn.
Frank Thon confessed not only to the murder of Evelyn Visich, but that he was hired by her husband, Peter.
I really was surprised after everything was said and done, after all of the investigative leads, that it all came back to Peter.
Frank tells detectives that he was introduced to Peter 3 months ago through a mutual acquaintance.
Peter asked this gentleman if he knew of anybody that could take care of his wife. Frank Thon requested $10,000 cash, with $5,000 being paid up front. We later learned that Peter obtained money from a friend of a friend on a loan. A short time after that, Peter Visich met Frank Thon at a pizzeria where Peter gave Frank the down payment of $5,000 cash. I looked at the money found in the van as this could have been the final payment.
To hear that for such a small amount of money that somebody was willing to go out there and kill someone, I was shocked and disgusted.
In his confession, Frank describes Peter's impatience to have Evelyn killed.
He told me that he had a second envelope ready. He was really pushing it.
Peter Visich was pestering him to get this done, so he decided January 7th was going to be the night.
Frank meets Peter at the Visich home the day before the murder.
He told me to lay out of the house and I'd be able to walk to the back of the house and he would leave a door unlocked for me.
Peter told Frank that he would leave the back door open, and he gave Evelyn's schedule for that day.
The next day, Peter establishes his alibi.
He went to his mother's house and then the shopping mall and then stopping to get milk. He knows that there's video cameras, he knows that he's going to get a receipt. That's all adding time to his alibi that can also be substantiated.
After sunset, Frank enters the Visich house and removes the light bulbs to lie in wait for Evelyn in the dark.
Garage door open, then I heard the house door open. Then I heard her coming up the stairs, and that's when I came out of the room.
He had a gun. He pushed her into the bedroom, had her kneel on the bed, and he told her he was merely here to do a robbery and he wasn't going to hurt her. He said he then took a knife that he had brought with him and stabbed her twice in the back.
She dropped to her knees from the bed. She slid down. Again, what do you do? I took her by the forehead from behind her. Yeah. I sliced in, then I sliced back. I heard the blade scratch the bone. I recognized the sound. She dropped immediately to my right on the floor. I heard the air leaving her body. I stabbed her 2 or 3 more times in the chest.
You leave the knife behind?
Yes, I did.
Where'd you leave it?
Stuck in the chest.
Frank Thon was the instrument of Evelyn's death. But Peter Visich brought that instrument into his own home.
On Valentine's Day, 2003, a warrant was issued for the arrest of Peter Visich.
Police rushed to take Peter into custody.
I said, Peter, I have very good news for you. He said, what's that? He was somewhat befuddled. I said, we found out who killed your wife. And he became like almost giggly. He's like, really, who? I said, you did, expletive. You're under arrest.
It angers me and it pains me to think that the person that she married was the one that did that to her. It's shocking. It's sad.
I was very surprised. Like, I was shocked. All of us were.
He went through this elaborate murder, and I just thought, like, how pathetic are you as a person?
Frank Thon pleads guilty for his role in the murder of Evelyn.
In exchange for his cooperation, he was promised a sentence of 20 years to life if he testified truthfully at the trial of Peter Visich.
In November of 2003, in front of a packed courtroom, Peter stands trial for plotting to murder Evelyn.
Evelyn's friends and family were throughout the trial present. They had to endure really gut-wrenching testimony, particularly when Frank Thon testified.
He said that he told her at the end, I'm gonna put you out of your misery. And your husband was the one that hired me. She was just in shock.
Peter Visich never takes the stand during the 8-day trial.
He showed no emotion the whole entire trial.
I would look at him and then just think to myself, like, why you had to get to that point? Why did you do it?
After hearing the evidence, the jury deliberates for only 3 hours.
The jurors announced that they did have a unanimous verdict, guilty on each and every count, including murder in the first degree, which carried a life without parole sentence.
We all screamed. We were relieved, and we felt like justice had been served, although it was bittersweet.
It's just so hard to comprehend why. Now the child doesn't have a mom or dad.
What he did to Ryan is just as unforgivable as what he did to Evelyn, because he deprived Ryan of one of the most incredible human beings I've ever met in my life. I've never met anyone like